Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Let's talk about the market today with some stat data. So, this morning I posted on X that the high of day and low of day zones, and these were just the initial zones, were here. These actually just come from setting all of our settings up based upon how the overnight set up. This pull was very interesting. The fact we really couldn't go break it, but typically when days set up this way, we're hovering in this upper quadrant. We're going to look to pop into the open. There's a possibility to pull back and go get some of this target data, but the problem is if you look, we really got it earlier in the morning. There's always still a chance to pull back into it, but if you're going to take this, you typically want to try to play it long. So even if you go sweep the low, the idea would be to try to get into the high of day zone. We had some patterns from Friday. We had patterns from Friday and just patterns that have been setting up to the high side. So we had this initial pattern setting up here that we couldn't quite get on Friday. And one of our extended high a day zones was up there on Friday, but it was a bit of an anomaly zone where today the initial high a day kind of put us in that range. And so if you know how a crab pattern works, you have this initial 1618 with a squeeze up to the 1902. So the idea here at the open, depending on how you were to take this, we still had a potential target to go knock out this, turn this day false, which would be to go sweep this box here. But we didn't quite get into our low of day. It's just very similar setup. If you look back on Friday, very similar setup. Except on Friday, we did get that sweep. So the expectation was take half a position, possibly get the sweep to take it back up to the high side. So if you did that and you were to buy into the open, your target price as you move up, you want your target price to really be somewhere between here in the middle of this high of day zone for a squeeze. If you want it to be safe, just stick it just above and start moving stops up as you creep up, because a lot of times these days will just kind of creep up. We had other patterns to the high side too, and we had so once we start moving through this, we start looking at our additional high of day zones. All right, and those high of day zones, if you look at the peak here, the next high of day zone peak is going to be here with a median that stretches a little bit further. So you're looking at 0.6 to about 0.8, which is why that box is a bit bigger. And then the next one after that, so once you kind of break the first one, which we ended up doing, you want to start looking at the other peaks that are of a similar distance, right? So, and then look and see if we have any completions to get into that area. So the initial trade being to pop into here, possibly get a pullback down here to add. All right. So, but as the market opened, I mean, we really just started pushing right into this zone. So the idea, if you were going to short, you could try to short in this range up here, but you'd have to be very careful because if you pull back into this 930 zone and you hold, then you're going to have a hard time getting back down through the rest of this. So as we continue to play this out, we pulled back and we held this 930 zone. I mean, we held the top of it. It just had no interest in pulling back into that zone yet. So we continued to try to reject this initial high of day, statistical high of day. Right? We tried and we tried. And we just couldn't do it. So now this thing's starting to push up into our next statistical high of day. So we're still in the range of this pattern completion, but we also have another pattern that's way up here, and it's a lot bigger. It's a much bigger pattern up here. So this thing could really squeeze us out up to 496 if it wants to. I mean, the idea being we want to reject in these high of day ranges because they're the statistical areas that we want to move to. But let's move that back. But as we get into these zones, if we notice, and you hear me talk about this a lot, once we get through this 4.5 deviation up into the sixes and up into the eights, I have no interest in shorting. And if I do short, it's only scalps because we do get pullbacks, but it's a lot less interesting to me because the chances of us pulling back down through this 930 are slim. Again, doesn't mean we will not. It just means to me that once we get up here, I'm not interested when we get in these deviation zones and taking this thing way back down. So, and that's really all we have today because we didn't have a lot of statistical data. The only thing that we had, just like we had Friday, was this 12-hour low was a decent statistical probability. But because we sat up here in this upper quadrant to this 12-hour and we really couldn't get back inside of it, see how we used it as a basically a base, how we used it as a base of operation to try to launch this thing. This is one of those days where I'm looking to play long even on a pullback at the open. And so now let's look and see where we are. I didn't really check the market here. We're just bouncing in between these two high of days. And looks like maybe we're trying to pull back. Yeah, okay, so here we are. So the idea being we really want to get up here in this range that we're in because we have this completion zone and we've already squeezed outside of it. So again, for me, I don't care if we come back down and we really dump this thing back through the 930, back through everything else. There is a decent probability of this still down here. It's a 70 some odd percent probability to go break this area. And there's a probability to come down here. But because we're sitting up in this range, I just don't have any interest in shorting it today. I don't care what it does because statistically, historically, for me, we don't do that. We don't come back down and take all of this stuff out. So the next thing that I will pay attention to is I will pay attention to around 1400, all right, market time. Because if you notice, a lot of times historically, if you look at the 1400 candle, okay, this is our 1400 candle right here. After 1500, we tend to try to come back to that 1400 candle. So the only other trade I will be looking for the rest of the day is to set up to take the market potentially back to that 1400 candle. But it just depends on what the market gives. If there's not a good setup for me to want to take the thing back down, I will not trade it. And, I tend to like to make my money at the opens. I like to figure out what the market's trying to tell me at the open, take my trades, and go from there. So hope everybody had a good day. You want access to this data? Talk to me. We can talk about it. So I will see everybody tomorrow.